We're live. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I've got Grant Drzyzga from Ravella, a founder from the day one, founder and CEO of Ravella. So thrilled to have that. I'll tell you something. I first heard about Ravella. This is, a compliment to you guys, talking to prospects, and they're like, do you integrate with Ravella? So whenever you hear people ask that question, you're doing something right. Like I had another question, when you see it in job descriptions, must know how to use Ravella. That's like something's working from a product market fit perspective. So I'll give you credit for that out of the gates. That's awesome. Yeah, Grant and I we met a couple of times along the way, but we had a chance actually to both pitch at Fast Pitch at Optech back in the fall. Got a chance to see your presentation. It was outstanding. One of the better presentations that was in that session. In addition, we've had a couple of chats back and forth. It's always good to talk to a CEO, founder, and especially one that's been going at it for 12 years. So congratulations on that. Surviving 12 years in the founder CEO role is not an easy. There's a short list of people in that role. Everyone is,
sucker for pain. I'm a sucker for pain.
Yeah, you're resilient to say the least, right?
Or durable. I prefer that word, right?
Durable. All right, let's go with durable. And the conversation today is always, we always try to angle in on what is a hell yes buyer. And yesterday we had Jacques Montiel on from Pure Property Management talking about the acquisition side of things, and now we're talking about software today. And the exciting thing about a hell yes buyer is that you stand back and look at things. Almost everybody is a seller, and it doesn't matter if you're in internal roles. We had CTOs, we had COOs, we've had all sorts of folks on different sides of the conversation, all talking about how they kind of make business go faster and how they help people. And looking forward to that conversation today, especially with 12 years in the role. You're definitely going to have a few stories to share about learnings and lessons around where you started from, how you got how Ravella kind of stood up, and then where you got into today. This is brought to you by IRCX. IRCX, we are remote maintenance and inspection software for property management. We help you save a truck. We help you do inspections really quickly, all powered by AI. So in about 30 seconds, you end up with your scoping document, 30 minutes, you end up with a scoping document, and about 3 minutes, you end up with you can typically end up with a remote resolution or at the very minimum, a full scope of what works need to be done. With that, and folks listening, if you're on the LinkedIn Live, add any comments throughout. Those are always awesome. It's helpful for us to kind of get some perspective there. In addition, if you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify, hit like, subscribe, makes it a whole lot easier for people to find us and helps us continue to have guests just like Grant. So with that, we'll pass that on to Grant. Grant, a bit about your background. Why did you start a company in property management? To your masochism perspective, attorney. How did you end up in this role? How did you end up starting Ravella?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's actually a, long ago story. I was a senior in college and, was living in a very nice off-campus apartment in Providence, Rhode Island. So I went to Brown, but, winters there are very cold and damp. And I noticed one day when I was, probably studying, definitely not, doing anything else.
Yeah.
It was getting progressively colder in my 1-bedroom apartment. I'm like, okay, so there's a thermostat up. It's not really improving. It starts reading down in the 60s, low 60s. So I called my management company. I emailed my management company. I actually drove over to their office. Nobody was there. And, not really like problem solving. I probably could have gotten a hotel room or done something else. I slept with a hairdryer on under my blankets and, created fire hazard and all that good stuff. And so, I think a lot of people that don't maybe have my or your entrepreneurial itch of like, I really needed to learn why this happened, because from my perspective, this was a critical operational failure that could have created like real harm or a real problem.
Yep.
And so I, shadowed that management company for the entire second semester of my senior year, watched what they did, kind of how they were using technology at the time to manage what was at the time close to 600 off-campus apartments just around the university.
Yep.
And they were on one of the older PMS systems. It really acted like more of a journal where they would go update it whenever they remembered to do so, basically. So there was always this gap or lag between what was happening in real time in the business and what was kind of being reported in the system, right? And I said, to myself, that's kind of fascinating, especially because 600 units seems like a lot. Obviously, when you get into bigger management operations, you can see 60,000, 600,000. So I was like, that's kind of cool. So I actually went to high school with some guys back in Michigan after I graduated and kind of came home for a little bit. while trying to figure out what to do, that we're in the middle of a multifamily syndication. So they went from 0 to about 20,000 units in 4 years, back when you could still do that. And they did a bunch of other stuff too that was like fascinating to see as somebody who was sort of selling into that group, where they brought management in-house 2 years into a little marketing engagement I had with them. So I got to kind of watch the mechanics of how that whole thing worked. And I was like, well, to grow that fast, you guys, to go from 0 to 10,000, let's say, you must have your systems and operations in order. And opened the hood, and it was even worse. There were like 7 different platforms, each kind of overlapped with each other in some nonsensical way. And they're managing hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate, like
this is before Zapier. This is before APIs. This is like CSV download, CSV upload kind of era.
Brute force. This was like an AMSI. They were using that. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but for accounting, they had like Entrada websites when they used to just sell websites, right? They had like just a bunch of stuff that was just kind of crazy. And, but what it showed me was this product footprint. Like all these operators, regardless of asset class, kind of exist within this product footprint that, traditionally is module A or product B or this, that, the other thing. And, there is a definable kind of floor plan of what the solution set should look like. And so really back in 2014, we started building into that. And Ravella's gone through a couple different iterations. There was I like to call it the era of like really figuring out what's important. We don't understand accounting, neither should you, which obviously didn't get us very far. So we spent about 3 years in the middle kind of rewriting our accounting logic in partnership with a couple like large national and super regional CPA firms that were sick of Yardi kind of, charging a bunch of money to operate for customers, et cetera, et cetera. So that was very worthwhile. And that eventually kind of became our wedge today. Think of us as like kind of a Yardi complexity of accounting and reporting infrastructure meets Appfolio end-to-end thesis, ease of use. And then we're kind of smack dab in the middle. So we're typically a good fit for groups that have some level of accounting or reporting complexity, that they can't just kind of go the traditional Appfolio or Buildium route, but they don't want to go all the way to the crazy complexity of Yardi, and kind of we sit in the middle between those two.
How does it become complicated?
How or where?
Like what situations make the accounting and reporting complicated? I mean, obviously there's like kind of like the single story of a single owner, property manager, and debt holder. That's pretty simple. But like when you get holder, what combinations of things make it complicated from a reporting perspective?
Yeah, I think there's nuances like between the different asset classes and markets. One that's very, very readily apparent is if you've got a management portfolio, so say you're a third-party manager and manage both, portfolios of single-family rentals and, medium to large-size multifamily, which is happening more and more because the same investors are diversifying assets and all that good stuff. The lender requirements on multifamily reporting, and like while that is changing in SFR, are way more stringent and way more specific than they are for your typical single family landlord mom and pop type investor. So that's an example there. Whereas, you could do a trust accounting model and kind of pay out, whatever the difference is, whatever the NOI is, you send to the owner on a monthly basis, versus you're doing like traditional one entity, one bank account, full accounting. We let you do both at the same time if you're in that situation. Whereas most companies would have like, we use Yardi for the multifamily and Appfolio for the single family. So then you're kind of training the same group of people on 2 different operating models across systems. So that's one. Another one that we're seeing more and more, especially now that there's a bit of margin compression for both, real estate investors or asset managers and the property managers, is management company accounting. So we treat management company accounting as a first-class citizen. And we basically tie all of the revenue that exists on the management company to expenses on the property side. So what we found in SFR, even at like large scale, small scale, whatever, people really forget to pay themselves a lot because of the kind of fog of war of, inbound, top of the inbox nature of the business. And we make it really hard for those financial processes to not come to a logical end, right? By, enforcing bank reconciliations. We did a whole embedded banking initiative to kind of make the flow of funds easier and more integrated on the platform. And also like too, enriching, one of the biggest things like that gets hard is when, you don't understand why an owner's upset with you, right? Whether it's multifamily, single family, whatever. In a lot of cases, it's because they don't know what the true cost basis of operating the asset is. So, in the simplest example, it's like, hey, we collected $1,000 in rent. I charged my $100 fee. We had some maintenance come up, so I sent you $400. Well, maybe the mortgage payment's $800, right? PM tends to not know that, and that creates these like asymmetrical, information gaps, which lead to a lot of heartache, pain, and people getting fired. And so we've done a lot around data collection to fix that too. But yeah, that's kind of where it gets challenging from an accounting perspective. Is there's all this stuff that you don't know, right? There's all these entities that all exist and kind of work together. But no system, I think, until ours has really kind of tried to track and manage the relationship between all of them in a systemic way that makes it so these like issues don't arise to begin with. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I mean, a little bit. I think we'll get deeper to it as we continue to chat. Like, so so given the nuance of that complexity, and that's where you guys are kind of best in the world at, does that help you find prospects that are specifically suffering through that problem?
Yeah, it does. Our best customers are ones that kind of can quickly identify that they're, if they're on AppFolio as an example, and nothing against AppFolio, like they've obviously built a great business and they're continuing to do so, and they're continuing to push and innovate, and they're good at what they're good at. But there are, kind of some built-in deficiencies around how management company revenue is accounted for, collected, all that stuff that people have experienced in pretty material ways. I mean, we had one customer convert to us last quarter that, the final straw for them was they missed billing $90,000 worth of maintenance that then the owner couldn't afford to pay them back. So they created this big, AR problem for themselves because that linkage didn't exist between, what was booked at the property and what they should have booked in at the time. Now it's all one system. So,
and what's interesting about that problem is that, something we've never really talked too much about, but the relatedness of that is that like vendors being paid is a big problem in the industry, right? And I don't think anyone's ever kind of said that it's the systems that could be the problem. They've often said it's just like the way, invoices and billing and work orders are tracked. They haven't really got into the whole fact that there could be a situation where the system, let you down in terms of like what you're trying to plan for and then ultimately bill for. And that cash cycle, and this is what's becoming obviously very clear in the last year and a half, is that cash cycle compression has become really important to everybody. Yeah. There just isn't enough cash anymore to float the vendors, to float the residents, to float the owners, to float everybody else. So everyone's, very, very sensitive to how that is working. It's kind of like almost like a treasury function is emerging that never really existed before because everyone was just, paying bills as they come in. There was enough cash that everyone was floating, but not anymore.
Yeah, the margin compression has basically gone down to zero, which, is scary operationally, but we ultimately think it's a good thing for how we think about the world. People are looking for a simple way at this point to know whose money is whose, how much should I make this month, and then kind of go forward and make operational decisions around like very, very clear numbers in that regard. So,
yeah. And when you guys go to market and you have the conversations, like, given that you guys have a unique kind of like I'll say a specific problem to solve, not a unique, a specific problem to solve that emerges as a niche. Do you go to market? Like what conferences do you go to that where you are going to find that kind of that blending of the Atlantic and the Pacific, right? That creates that problem.
Yeah, the brackish water, thankfully is an expanding surface area for us. So, I mean, we started growing in single family right around the time that we raised money. So, a couple more story elements. I mean, we have bootstrapped the business for the first like 9.5 years. So that was really kind of the learning period of getting in early with like customers, trying to figure out the operating model. What do we have to build? How does it have to work? All that stuff. And then we raised money to do, two things primarily. Number one, scale the organization faster because we were in a bit of a groove, and expand into the single family rental space more, and then bring elements of fintech into the platform that no one had really done previously at the enterprise level. So that's banking, embedded card spend management, some lending elements. We were actually at a time when it was, I'd say more advantageous to do so. We did have a commercial mortgage brokerage arm and then commercial insurance services kind of around when everybody was buying. that were just embedded options. I mean, that's like the bootstrappers,
Yeah.
bias is like, hey, let's own more of the wallet share, and like we can help with this and we can help with that and do all these things. We've obviously gotten a lot more focused over time on just like, hey, we're going to deliver the best software experience possible and really solve this float problem, as you correctly identified it. Yeah, that really, I think, metastasized early in the SFR space, between call it 500 and 2,000.
The amount of 1099s you're working with, right? Terms are more expensive. There's more cash flowing. You've got more explanation, like where you got in a W-2 environment or a multifamily, even mid-rise and up. It's fairly, the cash flow is more predictable than SFR.
Yep. 100%. And what's interesting now is a lot of the syndication shops in multifamily, we're getting a ton of bites on groups that are bringing management in-house, from third party to in-house as a way to save money, obviously, but they're not looking to drastically expand their tech stack. They're kind of looking to like weather the storm, get a good operating foundation in place, and then, kind of exit on the other side, hopefully either by selling the assets or, starting a third party management function as well. So,
well, I think what's going to be interesting, I mean, for your business is that like, I just talked to like Ryan Killian from Renew. We talked to Dan Ketch from North Point, and they're just they were pretty open about their approach with all this SFR noise that's going out there, is that they're going to start going into the smaller multifamily, right? I think what's interesting about this stuff that's going on is that, it's pretty obvious that there's a witch hunt for large property owners, but I'll get your opinion on it. What does that mean for property managers?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's still, of the, 12 million SFRs, right?
Yeah.
The percentage that's institutionally owned is just so small that like it's kind of a straw man of an argument, right?
Yeah.
That they're the ones that are creating housing affordability issues. At least that's how I feel. And so there's always, I think, going to be an element of institutional groups buying SFR. In most markets, I would argue that they actually set the floor for home values, which, if our goal as a country is to keep house prices high, to preserve people's net worth and, perceived stores of value, which is most Americans. Yeah. You can't force these groups to sell all their homes, because you'll flood the market with more inventory than there already is, and you'll see prices just race to the bottom. So,
and it's not the good stuff. You don't sell the good stuff.
Yeah,
right? 100%. The stuff that's fast falling, the stuff that doesn't have a leak in the roof, the stuff that's like good to have and own, that's gonna be capped. It's like any asset business. Like if you've got an oil and gas company and you've got certain pools and plays, you're going to keep your pools together and you're going to get rid of your plays. You're going to get your low performers. It's going to be an organic. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, but I mean, I think what's interesting though is that like the play of own and manage feels like it could get disaggregated to some degree. And so property managers, it could become like the gap that you close could become a more important gap in the next coming years. And I'm sure you didn't plan for legislation to be that forcing function, but the external force of actually saying, hey, I'm going to be managing SFR and small multifamily, and I'm going to have like different, that's going to make my clients look a little bit different than I'm used to before. That's going to make my cash flows look a little bit before. I'm now going to be managing W-2s and 1099. So like my business is now kind of like forced me to be stuck in the middle, and I need to choose a different solution. So it's kind of an interesting, perspective, or at least it could be a unique result set from all of this change, is that we're going to get more property managers involved and less owners, which is going to mean that in-house conversations you had, it's going to be difficult to do on the SFR side. And if they get really good at operations and cash flow and funds management, they're going to have an advantage at going at the smaller multifamily.
Yep, 100%. I mean, in small multifamily, unless you have that kind of robust, let's call it, centralized back office, that it's hard to build without good tech infrastructure. The type of money you can make on those types of assets, like let's call it sub 80 unit multifamily, that's like the toughest thing to manage in my experience. Right, like
you can't even afford a single person, right? Like your people per door is like 2, or I guess 80 or 40, right? And that's just like it's just on the boundaries of what's practical. And everybody's working 24 hours a day. You're kind of sharing people all over the place. It's a tough number.
And those deals aren't as well capitalized, right? There's not a ton of that was back in, the last, real direct hands-on experience I had with those was back before COVID, where it was tough then. It's probably even tougher now with the cost increases that have expanded pretty materially since then, with no real equal or opposite offset from a rent growth perspective. The properties themselves didn't get bigger. Their capacity to generate income didn't really change, but everything's 20% more expensive now. So what was already hard is now a lot harder.
Yeah. No, it's, you look at the cost of HVAC and all those things, it's gotten much more expensive. The competitive environment for all the people that do all the work, it's gotten more competitive. And then just the number of people, and that's demand side. And then just from the supply side, there's just not enough people. Mm-hmm. There's just not enough people. I was chatting with Rich from RealPage last night. I was out on a walk and we were chatting back around just the things that we know for sure is that the demand for housing is going to continue to go up. There's not enough people to do the work. And so given that you've got two things for sure, of all things I don't know, I know those two things are certain truths. There's going to be more demand for housing and not enough people to do the work. And so we got to think of a technology solution to solve the problem because there's no other option.
Yeah, it's the age-old, white whale of any investment. We're trying to find alpha through operations. We're trying to find alpha through technology. We're trying to find alpha in general at a time where that's really our only pathway through. Yeah. And I think again, for us, one thing that, we look at the market and there's obviously a bunch of really awesome point solutions. We want to work with as many of the top performers that can kind of demonstrate ROI as humanly possible. But then there's a bunch of other kind of larger companies that are increasing costs with no equal and opposite, expansion of ROI or tangible, benefit to the cost increase. I heard a stat, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, when I was talking to an operator. He's like, Grant, the amount of money, the cost increase for technology and real estate's increased by 700% in the last 20 years.
Really?
And it's a mix of, marketing, tech, and everything else all kind of blended together. But even in the last year, I saw an NRHC article that, cost increases for just software with no additional functionality, like SaaS shrinkflation, I think is what they called it, was 14% year over year. So it's people are paying more for tools that aren't delivering more in an environment where we're all looking for that ROI, right? Yeah. And, I think at the end of the day, the pendulum always swings back and forth, I think, depending largely on the economy of do I want one platform that's very cost controlled, that does the core things that I need done very well? Or do I want to build kind of my own tech stack, a best of breed, right? That usually exists when the problems you're trying to solve for are more, let's call it siloed. My maintenance ops are terrible. They need to be more efficient. Let's get a solution for that because everything else is sort of humming along. Yeah. But now it's the cost has just gotten so crazy. I was talking to a friend who works in one of the big SFR groups, and she was telling me that the combined ROI or the combined implied benefit would mean they'd have negative days on market for all their marketing tech spend, and they don't have negative days on market. So I think a lot of groups, regardless of whether they're big or small, are starting to look at kind of what's happened and how it's evolved. Yeah. And obviously thinning the tech stacks, but also finding a new way of kind of putting all of this stuff together so that it works for the business as it is today. Because it's been a rough 3 years, I think, for every asset class, right? Yeah. Hopefully it is heaven in 27, as some people have said.
That's great. That's the first time I heard that. So I've heard, survive till 2025, survive 2025, fix it in 2026, and then now you've got 2027 happening. What is it again? Heaven in 2027?
Man.
Oh God. That is opium. Okay, let's roll with that one. I like it. So you take a look at your customers and how they're, why they choose Ravella. Are they looking at what are they suffering through that they're seeking change, right? To buy from Ravella, it's very easy to buy from Yardi. No one's gonna give you a hard time about that. But obviously there's other choices out there for different reasons. Why are your customers choosing Ravella? What are they frustrated with from the current options?
Yeah, I think it's complexity. I think that kind of the older solutions can do a lot of things, but they almost require a PhD in computer science to to figure out. And then, you kind of get into the mix of it. And I think people are getting very sick of the sort of constant upsell, like, hey, I bought the core, but now I need this thing if I want it to work the way that I need it to. And then I need this other thing, or I need this other thing. Yeah. And so I think even if you're buying all the same color Lego block from like one of the bigger guys, or if you're, buying AppFolio, putting a data lake in place, and then plugging a bunch of other tech into it, there's a lot of noise out there, and being able to consolidate that's one, kind of good customer use case for us. Another is, you have this accounting problem, or you have this accounting anxiety, and you want to clean it up. You're either kind of at the precipice of like a, hey, we're scaling up event, right? Or you're getting into multiple asset types, or you're just like over it, right? People, I think, reach a point where, not knowing gets their business stuck. So there's all these unit thresholds and like any assets where people plateau and then kind of can't get over it. If people feel stuck there, it's usually because of an anxiety they have around their own business performance, or a lack of clarity into, what happened versus what should have happened. And we're a good solve for that. So.
And do you find that like when customers come over and they see how Ravella manages the complexity differently than how it was managed before, they kind of feedback that, like, why was it that way before? Like, why is it that way? Is there any kind of like this curiosity around, like, with all the money and the power and the time, the devs and all this stuff, why is it stuck that way? And they were kind of like double click on you and say, hey, like, I don't get it. Like, this is a great product and we're really happy we bought from you, but like, why are the other ones not doing this? This seems like something that is going to become a big problem for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, well, the very complexity of operations, usually the engineering solution to any of that is find the simplest, most kind of widely adopted solve and implement very quickly at scale, right? So like, let's use maintenance as an example in the AppFolio verse. If you're adding markups to a work order, or to any work that a third-party vendor performed, right? All of those tend to run through this account called vendor paid reimbursements, which is suppressed off of owner reports throughout the entire year. They show you, if it was $100, they show you 120 until the very end of the year, where they send them an actual accounting cash flow statement that outlines kind of the entire GL, income statement, and balance sheet. And then it's broken into the two categories. So, I mean, it's in every management contract that a management company is going to add markups. I mean, some people aren't doing it, but that's fine. But that was just an accounting workaround. Yeah, there's a cost to managing all that stuff, and it's got to be accounted somehow. And so there's different ways of doing it, and that complexity creates the problems, because every PMA, especially in SFR, the PMAs can be all different depending on the kind of like the tenure of the client, or the heritage of the PMA, or if there's an M&A situation, the kind of company that was there before, how they wrote contracts is all different. Like, there's one thing that's become very obvious about SFR is that just the churn that happens at the client level has created a lot of different contracts and PMAs that are in place, and that makes it very difficult. It's like a special deal for everybody. It's Burger King, right? Everyone gets it their way, and it makes it complicated. Yep. Yeah, and multifamily, I mean, it's a similar thing. Like the change order process for like a work order, if you get there, find something else that's wrong, the cost changes, and you're using like a third-party maintenance and billing or coordination system, that can get out of sync as well. So there's just all these little things where the process breaks if it's not done perfectly every time. And people tend to get very frustrated with that, and then look for alternatives that like at least simplify the workflow piece of it so the numbers are right, and then they can kind of move forward from there. So
they mentioned earlier that like when they choose to change, if there's a growth curve or something happens, like, have you been able to codify, like, when are people seeking to change from their pre-existing system and Ravella is a great fit? Like, is there an event or something you can look for on the outside that kind of goes, hey, we should go talk to them?
I mean, we want to talk to everybody, obviously, but
but you're great for a certain type of person, right?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. There's probably two subgroups that come to mind. One are the folks that have like truly plateaued, and they're in like a constant state of, I'm churning just as much as I'm acquiring on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis. So they're truly stuck right here. And a lot of that is because they can't resource appropriately. And then if you look at, why you need more resources, it's because your core systems aren't efficient enough to handle how you're working. So you either change those systems and processes, and you work on your SOPs, and there's a million consultants out there that are great. I actually listened to your podcast with Deb Newell. She's fantastic. About kind of just cutting away and, really figuring out what's my operating model, how does my business work, and kind of rebuilding them from there. So that's, I think, one group, are the people that are there. And the other group are people that are like, hey, I'm expanding to a new market. This thing happened. There's this big step change in my operations, and now I'm reevaluating anything because I have to do something, right? And then there's probably a third group of people that are just massively frustrated with everything else. That would be kind of your early adopters that have tried everything, are really searching for something specific, especially around AI right now, and are looking for, a novel platform-wide implementation of AI that they think should exist, but I think really doesn't at this point, which we're working.
That's great segue to kind of my next question. So from a technologist, founder, CEO, so you're in the selling seat, you're in the market seat, you're in the tech seat, where do you see, what, maybe better yet, what opportunities are AI, how do I frame this? What do you see is going to happen formally? And then what do you see is going to happen kind of behind the desk? What are people starting to see? Today, people are actively using OpenClaw, agentic, all these things to be able to solve the problems. And they're all kind of personal. It's like the homegrown spreadsheet era, redone all over again, right? Everyone's making their own VBA code model in AI form, or not everybody, many people are. And they're kind of getting an edge on time, effort, all those things. And that's kind of happening in the skunkworks side, the cottage industry of AI, I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. So let's say the cottage industry of AI is happening. What do you see in there, number one? And number two, where do you see, what part of that is going to transfer into formalized PMS systems like Ravella?
Yeah, where to start on that? I can start on, I guess, what we're doing, and then kind of go into the cottage industry piece, because I think they speak to solving the same problem, which is, I think comes from the belief that this business shouldn't be as hard as it is fundamentally, but it is, and it's hard because there's this massive, database of things that are all kind of related, but maybe don't kind of come up in the day-to-day hustle and bustle of decision making. And so from our perspective, when we first started, when I believed anything was possible with technology and that you could game the stock market and build trading algorithms that just made you a bunch of money overnight. The goal was always hey, let's codify SOPs that these businesses all have. There is a way that people want their company to run, right? Let's make that just automated and really easy. Hey, here's the guardrails for your business, bowling with the bumper lanes. So no matter what anybody does, we're gonna hit some pins and we're gonna move on, right? That was really hard to do, I think, until very recently. With the new LLMs that have kind of more capacity for logic and reason and can be trained on both external and internal data sets. So from our perspective, I kind of see, the biggest evolution in personal computing, as an example, was the graphical interface that was acquired by Xerox, by Apple, which was the first point and click implementation of the modern UI that every computer has now, right? Before that, it was terminals. I think that, at least for us, we see the future actually kind of moving back towards that terminal model. Hey, prompt and perform. Ask, AI within your enterprise platform to go and synthesize and do work faster than you can, using the data that we have internally, using the data that we have externally, using proprietary data sets that we've entered in, right? And help the human being on the other side of the screen get to a decision point, or get to the ultimate yes, no, maybe so, proceed, don't proceed, as fast as possible. That, we believe, is the true alpha of AI in real estate tech right now, and in real estate operations, is making truly exceptional, team members, property managers, regional managers, maintenance folks even better, right? By blending all of that context together that you can really only get from a simplified, standardized, normalized database like we would provide for our customers. So that's kind of thing one, is that hey, prompt and perform. We don't want to sit here and filter through tabs and waterfall menus to get the job done. Open a work order, assign a vendor, boom, it's done, we move on, right? I think a lot of the cottage industry type AI implementations are chasing that same sort of operational edge And it seems to be, at least in kind of the chatter I've seen online, more about kind of replacing the traditional cost model of like a outsourced staffing model. So I think people tried to solve this problem before with like, hey, I'm going to get a whole team in the Philippines and kind of rock and roll from there and do a little cost of labor arbitrage. Now I think the turnover of those types of folks in these businesses has become so prevalent that we're almost like spinning our wheels while trying to drive uphill, right? We're replacing more people than, we can get back in the pipeline, so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think people are trying to replace a lot of that sort of like outsourced labor arbitrage with these newer kind of homegrown AI solutions. I don't think it's bad.
Because I mean, like the first time you do it, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. It's if you're new to it, you maybe not be ready to understand the learning curve that you need to take. You manage folks that are overseas, and I mean, we have international team members, and they're awesome. Like they super helpful. But I can see how like some of the stuff that they do, it could be repetitive. It was interesting. I had a chat with a guy out of Uruguay. We were chatting, and he's an outsourcing company, and we were talking about how like outsources themselves. You start thinking about how to cannibalize their business, so they can start. They should be the owners of the agents, and the agent replaces the VA. And it's not an unnatural progression to go from people doing the work, Mechanical Turk, into an automated model. And you get to pick and choose which parts you automate the first, because the parts you figure out and smooth out along the way. So it feels like at the 40,000 feet level, this has been played out before.
Mm-hmm.
The wheel changed it. Like this has been all played out before.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think that there's pockets of work that felt that they were safe, and now they're being cannibalized. And it's a natural thing. It's just Mother Nature, but it's not necessarily comfortable when it's you. When you're the rabbit, it ain't comfortable.
Yeah, it was cool when it was, factory workers, when we figured out assembly lines. Right. Now it's not great because it's coming after my accounting job,
Yeah, it makes it very interesting. I mean, I think I'm exceptionally excited about it because, to your point earlier, I had this great chat a couple weeks back with some leaders, and it was like around the fact that like the nature of the job is painful. Like it's unfair. It's unfairly painful given how easy it is to do a whole lot of things in this world, and it's unfairly painful because it's in the structure that's involved, like you mentioned. The different sort of legalities to it, the different sort of like, I mean, if you're a fee manager and you've got multiple different clients that are running multiple different systems, like that's bananas when you think about things in compared to a normal company choosing an ERP versus a fee manager running a PMS. And so you end up with like, you talk to folks from like, I don't know, pick one, and they're running Salesforce internally. Plus they all have like access to 5 or 6 different Yardies, 5 Entradas, 5 Appfolios, and they're kind of like managing all this stuff. And that's a lot of friction for people that, at the end of the day, you're looking at a 40% turnover at the site level. And you're asking to have like these duct tape systems to be handed down, like they're precious, like the Gutenberg Bible being handed down from one person to the next. And it's just unfair, and so I'm hopeful that we're going to take some of the unfairness out of the roles so that people can get back to doing the part that, in the 40,000 feet level that is they're supposed to be doing. Like we're, caring for managing assets, which has been somewhat forgotten, managing residents, managing clients, right? But the data is so messy. You've got to add so many people at it that you're managing the people that are managing the mess, not managing the asset, the resident, the client.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, so two thoughts come to mind around that. Number one, and this is kind of relevant to building software like we've had to build here at Ravella over time, but system or organizational complexity exists no matter what, and where you deal with it really determines like, the success or failure of the outcome. If it is at the tail end, like you just described, where you got 7 million different things, and you're kind of trying to figure out how to warehouse the data, how to normalize it, how to standardize it, you as the end consumer of it are kind of taking the responsibility of the onus for like, creating something that is then, either machine learnable or AI applicable, right?
Right.
Our thought process is, hey, let's deal with all that complexity like on our end. So we at least like know kind of, for lack of a better word, where the logical or business logical bodies are buried and can kind of work around that to create that same type of like clean data infrastructure that you can then take and apply all of these cool new technologies to. Without that, I think it gets like really, and that's like both for our own internal AI, but also for any other AI products that we work with, right? Because you guys on the point solution side are only as good as the information like we give you, right? And that we can ingest back from you. The idea is for everything to become more of this like self-fulfilling accretive process, but it just isn't, because like everyone is kind of working in silos and not communicating or not focusing on customer outcomes, which is I think the thing that's like been lost in this whole.
I'm really optimistic. I'm really optimistic from some of the conversations I've had in the last couple of weeks around that we were coming around the turn on that. Specifically, like I feel as though if I'm choosing a PMS right now, I'm going to have a modular protocol connector will be a mandate in terms of like if we use Claude, the recommend say, hey, we use Claude, do you connect to Claude? And if they say no, they're like, well, really? When are you going to connect to Claude? Okay, not next year. Like now you're all of a sudden out of it. Like this might not have been on someone's shopping list like in November of 2025, but now it's like my people won't do it any other way, right? And this cottage industry is forcing the large entities to adopt into new ways of thinking. It's very, and I'm hopeful, as I said earlier, that we're going to take away all the bad work, right? The bad work is like sucking souls out of the industry and making it very difficult to serve assets, serve people, clients, serve residents, is going to make the job easier. Because like you read the job, like I were talking to people October last year, October 2025, right? I'm at a conference, I'm chatting with somebody and they're like, I got to run, it's planning season. And I just got 27 plants. And I'm like, oh my God, like there's no planet where those all look the same. There's no planet where they roll up with a single consolidation function. But now we're starting to think about the reality of the friction of the business that's sucking out energy, sucking out talent, and sucking out value. That's just, it's native to the way we've architected the way it all comes together. So I'm curious. I mean, from your side of things, you take a look at the deficiencies of the data flow. Where's the first place you want to focus?
It's that blend of like actual operating reality data, which is traditionally held within the PMS, and then what's happening outside of that, either both from like a rent AVM or valuations AVM perspective, but also from like what the asset management team has access to that they tend not to share with the property manager, right? I think it's traditionally accepted, and I think this is kind of an issue with the industry in general, and it has been for a long time, that the pro forma used to acquire an asset, that they used to get the loan, that they used to raise money, to buy the deal, is basically never shared and is gate kept with the property manager who's responsible for actually like executing it. And so that exercise of like, hey, I got to put together budgets for this year, the plan for the year, whatever it is that happens at the like operational level, right? There's somebody that like knows what that should be, that has like the rubric for grading, like what is effectively response to the test, right? That is just kind of trying to see, I think in some cases, like what they can realistically get away with. Like, are you going to overcommit to delivering more than we need? So great, right? But the age where that's like possible or likely is like really kind of come and gone. And now more than ever, I think it's very, very important for people to kind of open up the, dust off the pro forma, hand it over and say, hey, this is like what we have to have happen. If that's not realistic, we have to recast this and like share the bad news with our stakeholders, with our lenders, like sooner rather than later, as opposed to, let's go through 6 different turns of this document or this budget, push back on every little thing because we need, some expansion in operating margin or whatever here. It just takes time. And I think like keeps people not focused on the right thing. And so that's like, I think for us, like a big focus is what does it actually take to operate this asset beyond that? What's your mortgage payment, right?
Right.
What are your insurance costs? How are those increasing year over year? How are we thinking about accruing for property taxes or deferred maintenance?
Yeah.
That needs to be top of mind for people operationally, because when they're making every little spend decision day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, quarter in, quarter out, without that context of kind of where you're at any given moment, you'll overspend, right? Or you'll focus on the wrong thing, or you'll do all of this stuff, right?
The big an interesting kind of question is like, do you think that, so let's go back and let's go kind of think back on the centralization experiment and what that meant. And the fears around that was around, hey, people are going to leave the building and all those things. But part of the problem centralization was trying to solve was that the building they were all operating as individual islands, right?
Yeah.
They weren't really rolling back up. The P&L, the pro forma, all that stuff. Asset manager had 25 properties underneath them, and like it all rolled up, and that was it. And but like now, I think there's an opportunity. Well, so what's your perspective? Is there an opportunity that while people are going to be like there's going to be a mix of centralization or automation. There's going to be bots, agents, all those things. But do you think it's possible that with this improvement of the viscosity of data or the fluidity of data, that we can actually tighten up the gap between corporate and the site? Am I hopeful, or is that possible? Like, because of what you just described, now we're all marching the same P&L. But before, I didn't see the P&L. I didn't even know the P&L. I just worried about leases, rents, occupancy rate, maintenance orders, turns, and maybe capital. But now I know the P&L. I know the banking. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it is possible. I mean, and I liken that more to the relationship between like property and asset manager, just in general. Yeah. So corporate versus site, or property versus asset manager. It's equity versus operator at the end of the day.
I can. It's top half of the P&L and the balance sheet.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Because the P&L asset and the balance sheet's all the asset. Everyone else is just like, let's get leasing and operations.
Yeah, I think it's possible, and I think it's also like timely, because you can't operate, I think, in the same cost model. In multifamily, as an example, like I don't think you can have property manager, assistant property manager, senior leasing person, junior leasing person, leasing analyst, maintenance coordinators, 6 maintenance guys. Like I don't know if that works anymore. Just given occupancy challenges, rent price growth, just again, all the P&L pressure we've been talking about this whole time,
and open job positions. You just can't hire those people. Aren't on the shelf.
Yeah.
90 days to hire somebody these days. It's 90 days, so that's like 10% of your 8% of your average workforce work productivity is gone because you can't fill a job, and then you're taking in 40% turnover. So like, you're operating at like really negative net productivity for the kind of pro forma,
Yeah. And so I think, reducing the, let's call it, Chinese firewall that's between corporate and the property, and really getting aligned around like the plan and what has to happen, like what must be true in order for us to hit like a suitable or sustainable operating milestone here. Not like what we get away with, not like, hey, let's push and burn people out and do whatever. Yeah. More than ever, like the longevity of human capital within, real estate businesses or property management businesses is important. That knowledge, that relationship with the tenant, that's what drives renewals, I think, more so than how many emails you send or how nice the text is or whatever the offer is. If people like living in a place, they like the community that's been built there. And I think people are still the cornerstone of that experience. They, like the property managers, the community managers, the leasing folks, are the ones that make somewhere feel warm, welcoming, and like home to a certain extent. So I don't think that's necessarily going away. But I think you're right. Like the desire and probably necessity to set them up for success with more access or more kind of clarity around what has to happen in order for this property or this business to remain viable is a needed and probably, shifting change that's going on.
Well, I think it's interesting. You kind of dig into, probably a bit of a stretch for someone like me or you to talk about how like data can start to solve AI, and data, the thing that everyone's scared of, could actually be the solution to some of the problems that you read about in some of the surveys, the staff level surveys, right? So you look at like Swift Bunny put out a survey this time last year. It talks about the site level overworked, everyone, on average, they're working like 48, 49 hours a week on site, plus on call. Everyone's depressed. They see no fulfillment in their career. They don't have a lot of transparency in where they're going. But maybe this thing that we're scared of, AI and data, is actually going to close the gap on those things and add clarity, because it is just plain difficult to provide that kind of leadership when you're in a different city or different part of the town that where the property management is being run versus the site, because people just don't walk to sites that often in a corporate world because they got a corporate job to do. Yeah. So it could be an interesting, unplanned outcome, whereas this gets deployed, as we start optimizing these plays and these portfolios, that we're actually going to get better transparency on what those careers look like at the site level. And it could be that AI actually improves retention versus like being the cause for it being a catalyst for increasing it.
Yeah, I think what it is driven off of is the roles getting more human specific. Like let the sales, I always say, like let salespeople sell, let support people support, let engineers engineer, right? Yeah. Let property managers manage properties, not accounting or this or that. I mean, if you think about like you're on site any given day, how much context switching happens between like what's the thing that pops up, right? Yeah. It's constant. I don't know about you, but like I hate when I get interrupted when I'm in that like working flow state. It's impossible to like make any progress or momentum. And so when you talk about, folks that are working 90 hours a week, that's mostly to get caught up because the 8:30 to 6 is dealing with whatever is top of the inbox, right? Yeah. And you're right. AI is phenomenal at synthesizing that, pulling out what's important, recognizing patterns, and then deploying or running the same process over and over again, which has really been our approach to implementing it. It's that, and it's also solving for the things that continue to crop up that create heartache and pain, like, hey, did you bill for these things? No, you didn't. Okay, click this button. Now we'll go do it for you, right? What did somebody miss that creates an income statement problem, which could lead eventually to a catastrophic balance sheet problem?
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of could be interesting that like these gaps that are happening in the operations awareness and understanding, like, we could see this, and you read about this last 3, 4, 5 years, people writing about how we've been operating in such a reactive environment. But I'm hopeful that we can start becoming more, I'll say, in the present, and then maybe even the predictive point of perspective, and that we're actually, because we're cascading data end to end, we're able to drive accountability at the site level. Not that it wasn't there before, but aligned accountability. I'll use better words. Aligned accountability between the site and corporate, and then we'll be able to be more better stewards in terms of the assets that we're managing, the clients we manage, their fiduciaries for those assets, because we're able to solve the problems or give people options before the calamity happens.
Yeah. And I mean, the other big thing that we've been focused on that I think is important for this whole AI evolution of the space and just tech in general is showing the logic and showing the work to whoever asked the question or requested the change, right? Yeah. Here's why I'm recommending this, right? Based on all of this operating context that I have, off of the budget context that I have, off of like the market context that I have. And then that kind of makes people feel more comfortable with whatever the outcome is, because they have something they can turn around and defend to either a regional manager, a CFO, an investor, whatever it is, right? And that's I think key for developing trust between the folks that actually use these tools every day, who I think are, in a way, rightfully terrified that this new tech is going to come in and take their job, which leads to kind of a fall off on adoption curve, right? So you need to find ways for it to make people better, to give them access to more, to eliminate some of that context switching, and to just, again, align, operations with asset management in a way that like makes people make good decisions and ensures everyone's sitting on the wrong side of the table, and you don't run into situations where it's the property manager's fault. Let's change those every 3 months, like we change our underwear. Like that's going to solve what is a critical problem with the asset itself. So,
well, that's part of it. And that leakage of understanding, be it data, be it kind of like tribal, be it how things work, like all of that's endemic in the whole way things are working right now, because there's this lack of continuity between people to people. Because you do get some it's never 100% handoff, especially in the roles, right? And so you end up like, and it's not the software, right? It's the software is just doing the software's job, but ultimately it's the people that are using the software that end up paying the price, because they have that, they're going to absorb the gap in their Sunday time and their, their after hours work, because the software is just doing what it can do based on the inputs that it has. And the rest of it is all like just people making it work. And I'm hopeful that's going to go away. And at the minimum, the cottage industry is going to highlight where the enterprise industry needs to focus, because people are voting with their time. Like, people are after hours. I think it's crazy. Like, after hours, people are buying with their own money, like Mac minis and stuff, or they're buying servers that are offline, and they're processing the data that they otherwise need to process in their machines because it's too much work. The fact that people are doing that they're voting with their time and their energy, and they're learning to create open clause all over the place, is remarkable to think about, when you realize for so many years we've said, well, I don't know if my team will adopt tech. But like, here they are in the deep end, thrilled about it and happy to talk about it to anybody, and then what you end up with is a whole list of, if I only could, if I only had, I could do this. And it kind of, like, the demand scope of what the problems we could solve from a technology perspective have gone from this to like this. And it's coming from the users, which is my side, if I get demand side feature requests from users, I'm thrilled, because I know that's where the problem is. It makes me I don't want to imagine a feature. I want it to come from the people that are using our product, that are on the field, because that's the best feature.
Yep, 100%. And that's what's fascinating too, I think, to piggyback off of your statement on the cottage industry. It's, what problem are they really all trying to solve? It's varied, it's interesting, but it's really this holistic end-to-end, like, this is really hard. There's a lot of data to look at. Like, I need something that can produce something actionable for me, like, faster, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have time or money to throw at the problem anymore. Like, we gotta get our arms around this.
And the fact that people are spending their personal paycheck on trying to solve this stuff is like, there's no greater indication of a gap in the marketplace than that.
Yeah, 100%.
So when we take a look at, we'll kind of wrap this up real quick here. You've done this for 12 years now, or almost 12, and you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. What one lesson do you wish you kind of like could play back to yourself in year 2, 3, 1, wherever, earlier days?
That's an interesting one. I think there's product or market-based lessons, right? Of like how things work, or like, I wish I would have studied the kind of stakeholders behind the immediate, like, who I was selling to, which were the operators before. Because if you understand how your customer thinks, or what they care about, or what levers you can pull from the customer side to make your client look like a hero, that ultimately like makes your relationship with them better long term and creates value for everybody in the chain, right? So that's one thing. I think from a business perspective, obviously when you're an entrepreneur, you're flexible, you're kind of you're floating, you're finding your way, right? When you do find that product market fit thing, the experimentation window has to shrink, and you have to get really laser focused really quickly from a business perspective. And that's been a evolution for me over the last year, which is, I love real estate. I love it because it's so varied, interesting. There's a million different ways to like solve a problem if you have access to the right markets. But at the end of the day, when you're building value of a company, like, you have to build it in the right way, not in a very varied way, to really kind of get to that next level. So for us, we want to continue to build and grow the software platform and bet as much as we possibly can to make, operations easier, control the P&L cost structure for operators and property managers alike. But it's all going to be driven off of software and really leading this AI charge, and I think in a thoughtful way that adds value and produces results for customers. So yeah, no more side quests, dialed in on operating.
Having focus is very relieving, right?
Oh yeah.
Because you remove yourself of all the distractions of things that consume all that other energy.
Mm-hmm.
Who should we talk to next in the show?
Given the state of the world, have you talked to Evan Howard or Thad Tarkington from Second Nature?
I have not. I chatted with Evan in Dallas back in the spring, or the fall, sorry, but I haven't chatted with him on the show. That's a good idea.
So they would be two good ones on the resident experience side of things, like looking at tenants, and they're doing a lot, I think, to build credit and put people into a better position to succeed, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then the other one too, have you met Nick Whaley from Nutility?
No.
You should. I mean, after this, remind me and I'll connect you guys via email.
Cool.
But Utility is going after that, utility billing segment of SFR and are getting a lot of traction there in the SFR space. And Nick's a wealth of knowledge on that. And then just like operational stuff in general. Great dude.
Awesome. Well, I'll take you up on that. More conversations is always good. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Grant. Appreciate the conversation today. If you're listening on the podcast today, like, favorite, subscribe. Makes it easier for the people to find it. Listen to LinkedIn Live. Please just add in any comments there, and both Grant will get to it. Stand by for the blog posting and other shorts that come out. Look for that. Love to get any comments and feedback on that. It's been a super good conversation. I really appreciate allowing us to kind of go meander a little bit through the AI conversation. It's really been stuck in my brain lately, and how to think about what that means in the grand scheme of things. Even our roadmap is changing as I think about what AI can do. Appreciate the comments around like your customer's customer. We haven't talked about that yet in this show yet, which is remarkable, but because given the way that this industry is structured, but it really is. I think someone talked about that at SAP as they moved to when they moved to, who the heck was the guy? The old CEO of SAP when he went to wherever he went to, I can't remember. He started talking about the customer's customer and how that was the really important thing to solve for, because you do solve a lot of problems when you get your stakeholders' mentality in mind, and that helps save a lot of energy. This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Grant. Appreciate everyone for listening today. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks all.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
And we're good.